like, well, this is the best social cause I can think of, is giving everybody a seat at the table. And that's really it. And so my history with Twitter, with Square, look, they weren't that innovative technologically. What they were access revolutions. They were democratization. They gave people the ability to be a publisher, the ability to take payments. And now we have the ability to democratize money around a common standard, which is really what the internet did. That's how we got from CompuServe and AOL to the World Wide Web. And so that's got to happen with money. I'm sure it's going to happen. I can't think of any other way the future is going to happen. And it just makes my life really simple. It's just keep all ships pointed in that direction. Stable coins are a step in the right direction, but we can do better. And so that's really the message that I'm there. I'm not against stable coins. I back a bunch of companies that do stable coins, but this is stable coins plus with consumer protections and assurances so people can have all those benefits and still feel safe, safer than they do with stable coins.
Hello and welcome to Fireside with a VC. My name is Andrew Romans, and today we are with one of the most interesting people I literally know, Greg Kidd. There's so many different topics we can get into, so I don't want to use 60 minutes on his background, but Greg could correct me on some of this, but he founded a company in the 90s, got it to 225 million revenue plus, went public, made something like 62 acquisitions. And so it's not surprising that his investment firm is called Hard Yakka, which I think means hard work. But
it means hard work in Australian slang, kind of like digging up your septic system if it's leaking.
Okay, it's like indigenous slang or something from Oz. And his company got hacked by some kid named Jack Dorsey, who Greg was smart enough to hire, make an employee. They somehow were roommates in San Francisco around the time that Jack founded a company called Twitter. And of course, Greg said, all right, here's a couple bucks. So he was on the ground at that. And of course, it was in every other hit record that Jack made, and worked for the Fed, has a better understanding about what the law says when it comes to crypto than a lot of anarchists out there. And so he's just been in I remember having lunch with you on a very beautiful sunny day, sitting on the street in San Francisco where you were talking about Ripple. And I foolishly didn't put all my money into it. I should ask you what the market cap of that was. But we could go on and on. This guy is just invested in a lot of things. Whenever I show Greg a deal, it's too late stage for him. But, Coinbase, Solana, he's just been on all these things early stage. So no boasting about logos when he entered at $1 billion valuation. He's in it, God knows what, $3, $5, $8 million valuations on these things. And I want to leave some time of how he's going to fix Nevada and the U.S. government, because Greg is now running for Congress, I believe.
Well, no, so I ran for Congress last time. I've been in the belly of the beast, so I did not win, but it did introduce me to the whole process, and now I have much more of a hand in legislation that's coming down the pike, both at the national level and at the state level. So we have a new charter coming in Nevada, which will be a banking charter for payments-oriented companies. So it's just deposits and access to the payment rails. And so that's one of the big things happening at the state level. And at the national level, I did get the opportunity to buy and close the deal on purchasing a nationally chartered bank, Vast Bank in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is OCC regulated and Fed holding company. So we're both in at the national level and are passing state legislation that give us basically a seat at the banking table, even though I'm from the crypto world.
Okay. All right. So listen, enough bio, because it just look him up, Greg Kidd, and you'll find it. So Greg, I don't even know where to start. Maybe why don't we dive into crypto? Give us a quick background. I think you were spending more money at Twitter on SMS messaging than payroll or something. So you kind of got some views on how to give us the quick historical, and let's dive into tokenizing bank assets and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Basically, Twitter and Square were just great opportunities to work with Jack Dorsey. I'm not a founder. Jack is clearly the founder. I'm the guy that put the milk in the fridge and did work on things like why the text message bill was bigger than payroll. But it was a great introduction. So I did that. I did work at the Fed and with ex-regulators through the financial crisis. So it's kind of a regulator's perspective combined with tech startup perspective. And so I did take that risk manager position, first chief risk officer at Ripple, and was around for like
I
Coinbase,
think you
which
were
was a
employee number 10 at Ripple, right?
employee number 10 at Ripple. And I think,
For those that don't know, what was the peak market cap of Ripple?
well, I mean, Ripple's peak market cap is like now. It's, it's there's a float of 100 billion, and the coin's over $2. So, some of that's in treasury, but you can just multiply 2 times 100 billion, and that's got to be a very big market cap. And so I had a bunch of XRP. Right now I have XRP, I have Bitcoin, I have Ether, I have Solana. So basically I like Bitcoin, but I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist. I have uses for each of the different tokens, but really the thing that's been a big focus of ours is not crypto, not even Hard Yak of the venture company. We've moved over into being the bridge between the crypto world and the financial services world. So we've started investing in buying banks that would be friendly in a post-operation choke point reality to let the real financial world of traditional legacy financial world interact completely seamlessly with the crypto world, including stable coins, deposit tokens. And so basically we're looking to get to that Star Trek future where money moves as easily as, text messages for video, music, text, etc., etc. And so that's been the big thing. There have been very few people in the crypto industry that's been able to get a foothold in the banking industry, both here in the US. We've also invested in Bank of London. We have a deal to buy a European bank as well. And all of these are meant to be crypto, stablecoin, deposit token friendly.
Wait a minute. I think I know Bank of London. Who's the founder of that company?
Well, Uphold actually started it, but you couldn't get the charter if it was more than 10% ownership by a crypto company. And so we gave up 90% of the control, but it's a whole new cast of characters there. But it actually started with Uphold almost a decade ago with that process. But now there are 6 clearing banks in the UK. The only 2 in the last 150 years are Clearbank and Bank of London. And so we're investors in that, as well as Vast Bank here in the US. And we've got a acquisition we're working on in Europe right now for another bank
So
there that would
there's
have.
always, I mean, there's always been an issue, and you were kind enough to be part of my book that I wrote, which published in 2018. Masters of Blockchain and Crypto. But there's always a delay between innovators and regulators, and in finance, that can put you in a jail cell next to Bernie Madoff if you're not paying attention to it. Not to mention taking an educated understanding of risk in all that regulatory side. When did you buy? Was it last summer that you bought Vast Bank in Oklahoma?
Vast Bank closed last June. So we made, that's an OCC regulated national charter with Fed holding company. So that is
Okay.
complete, and we now have it. So I think us and Jackie got lead bank. Those were kind of like the only folks that were actually able to move into banking during sort of the 4 years under the Biden administration, where it's really, really tough for someone from fintech, let alone crypto, to get in and actually buy a bank. Many people say they'd like to buy a bank, but to actually pull it off and do it, very, very few people have made it through that filter.
Okay. And so, it almost makes me laugh if like Tony Soprano finally bought a gas station. Now that Greg Kidd owns a bank, what is the plan? I mean, are you going to like debank weed companies, or what is the
So we
underlying
have
thesis for a guy like you to do that?
the big principles are open banking, which means that all the balances there with an API will be accessible to developers. So the money that's at the bank can appear in a marketplace, it could appear in an app, a wallet, and any other third party can get access to those dollars. So instead of actually having to have money in a pooled account, like you would do with Coinbase or Square or Venmo, the money actually is individual bank accounts for end users. And that brings me to the second point, which is fair access, which means if it's legal and it's licensed, as long as it's not abusive, we're going to bank it, whether it's an entity or an individual, anywhere in the world. So it means everyone will be able to hold tokenized deposits, which run on the same technology as stablecoins. So it's just like USDC or Tether, but it's actually issued directly by banks, not just our bank, but a consortium of banks. We call it USBC. So it has all the features of a stablecoin. The big difference is ours always have identity. You can't hold a USBC without having an identity because we are
And what
looking
was
to
the name of
comply.
your ID company?
So
Uh,
that's Global ID. So Global
Global
ID
ID.
helps you get the identity, but it doesn't have to be Global ID. As long as you send in credentials, the usual stuff, round tripping your phone number, government ID, you'll get a badge which will let you hold USBC. USDC you can hold in a wallet with no identity. And that's great, but that might, at scale, that could cause some problems if lots of money is coming into Walmart with no identity. Eventually somebody might, ask a question or two. But for USBC, same rails running on either Ethereum or Solana, but issued directly by banks and always with identity. So you can think of it as something that works like with regulated DeFi, that even if you're in a DeFi wallet like MetaMask, if you're going to hold USBC, there's going to be an identity attached to it.
So,
So that's the
so
big push.
is this like I mean the first time I heard about Bitcoin and somebody explained it to me, someone like you, I thought, oh, how nice for Osama bin Laden, and this sounds like money laundering and terrorist heaven.
Yes,
And so is part of your thesis to say we're going to remove the anonymity from this, and so it'll remove any concern about that sort of thing?
that's correct. And so if you think about a future that has blockchain, which is immutable,
Right.
irreversible, AI, which means you can look for patterns of what's normal and abnormal, and identity. If you put those three things together and you're doing terrorist financing or money laundering or tax evasion,
Right.
you really don't want to use blockchain, right? When there's an
Yeah.
AI system overlaying and there's identity attached, because you're going to get
Right.
caught.
It's like
Maybe,
when the
maybe not
Chinese
right
Communist
away.
Party, yeah, when the Chinese Communist Party first heard about crypto, they're like, maybe we do like this.
Yeah. So you have to have privacy balance, but once you have all that stuff, then this system, instead of being a conduit for the Osama bin Ladens of the world, it's their worst enemy, because it means everything will be traceable. Even if you have privacy, as long as AI can see, well, that's an abnormal pattern, then you're going to have a warrant, and the guys with guns and badges are going to come out of the helicopters and cuffing somebody, right? So it's a world in which we use the technology behind crypto not as a way of avoiding taxes or money laundering laws or tracing terrorist financing, but just for doing everyday commerce, trade, commerce, retail, wholesale, everything. And so it's a more efficient system to buy a cup of coffee, right? And so we're talking about running dollars, the most popular currency in the world, which is the same thing that Tether and USDC are doing, but just talking about running it compliantly as opposed to like out in the wild. So
Right.
I'm not against stablecoins. I'm just saying that stablecoins at a certain volume coming into like a legitimate business raises the same challenge as people coming in with basketfuls of cash. Like, well, where did this cash come from? So we're all for having stablecoin legislation passed, but that's going to take care of the issuance and the redemption and making sure it's safe, that the money's behind it. But what happens in between could be a little bit of a compliance issue. And so, you know, we
Okay.
think that a day of reckoning will come when people will say, well, we like the way stablecoins work. Is there something that is a bit more compliant?
Sure. 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 I mean, there's a lot of questions around Tether and where is the money and is this legit? So I want to get into like where are things now with your USBC and with Vast Bank being compliant with today's law.
Yep.
And if Greg Kidd were the, you know, David Sachs czar of AI and crypto, what should David Sachs be pushing through over there? Like, so where are we now? And how is USBC working with existing archaic 1932 laws? And
Sure.
where should you, as an expert, tell us all that we should change to so this can work better?
So USBC currently exists as a stablecoin. It's issued offshore in the Bahamas. We got the same license that Sam got
Okay.
You got the first license, we got the second. But so it exists, but it's right now just a stable coin, just like Tether or USDC. And as such, there's going to be a dime a dozen stable coins out there. The big change, though, now that we own the bank, is to move the issuance from offshore through a fintech to onshore through the banking system. And so that's in the process of happening. Should start in June or July. We're already trialing this with Uphold, who has allowed people to hold USBC. They've got something like over 50,000 users that are holding it. But that technically is still a stable coin until we move the balances from offshore, issued by a fintech working with an offshore bank, to onshore, issued directly by an OCC chartered Fed holding company, Bank of the United States. Because then those dollars will be directly backed. They'll be FDIC insured. They'll come with Reg E protections for chargeback. They'll have the protections, they call it UDAP, unfair, deceptive, abusive practices. Any of those things happen. Those things happen with crypto, you're shit out of luck. But if they happen and it's done through a bank, banks follow those laws. And so it means there will be consumer protection. It means that
So
in Europe, with the MICAR legislation on crypto and stablecoins, that will not apply to what we're talking about because we're talking about issuing directly from banks. So these are bank deposits running on crypto rails, right? And we're trying to make them available to everyone in the world. We're starting with the US dollar, but because of our investments, we'll tackle the pound and the euro next. But I think most people want dollars, let's be clear.
yeah,
Not just in the
well,
US, everywhere
I
else.
mean, if you live in eurozone, you might want euros,
Maybe.
and the
Yep.
same. I had the unfortunate experience of being paid from Silicon Valley in dollars when living in London, and it was like get down to 2 to 1
Yes.
when I was there. So I was always getting paid in the wrong currency. Just for anyone listening to this, what is a concrete example of why USBC would improve their life or business? So what does it look like absent USBC, and why is it so much better with USBC?
Well, with USB-C versus, say, like USDC, USDC is an address on the crypto world, on a crypto ledger, but it doesn't have an account number. So you can't get your paycheck deposited into USDC. I mean, you could send it and then have it converted, but like with deposit tokens, they're both an address on a crypto ledger, but they also have a bank account number. So all the things you do with banking, including receiving wire transfers, your paycheck in, bill pay, they all still work. But if you want to send money, like just like as a text message or in a digital wallet or on MetaMask, you can use that too. So it's dual purpose. Remember the old days when you get a phone, it was either CDMA or something else. And somebody said, well, why don't we just put both chips in the phone? And it doesn't matter. Or used to get a laptop and it was either 110 or 220. And people said, well, why don't we just make it dual voltage? Now money will work both in the crypto world and in the banking world. There doesn't have to be a distinction. The ledger can do both.
Okay,
So that's so it
you've
means you
always
can
been
like
yeah, you've always been
when
the
you
bridge builder. So you're building like a bridge signaling gateway between the conventional legal banking world and the crypto world.
like you can have a USB-C card and just buy a cup of coffee. But if I just need to send money to you at the end of this, like $20, I just send it to you just like I'm on Venmo. But the difference is like when you send Venmo dollars, it's Venmo to Venmo or WeChat to WeChat. With stable coins and deposit tokens, they're attached to an identity. They work across all wallets, all applications. They're portable, they're interoperable. They're just a better product than digital dollars, which are trapped in one side. Like digital dollars are like CompuServe and AOL. Like stable coins and deposit tokens are like the internet, right? It's like I'm sending you this picture. It doesn't matter whether you're using Google Chrome or Safari, right? The money is independent of the browser or the application that you're
Yeah,
using it within. It's attached to your identity, and wherever your identity goes, your money goes with you, right? And so that's the switchover. And
yeah.
like the money's sitting at the bank, but because of open banking, any developer can access that money when you delegate authority to them to do so. That money, and so instead of ending up with a lot of little pots of money and a lot of different applications and marketplace, the money is just always with you. One stack of dollars that you can take with you anywhere you go.
It's kind of like in telecom, we had SBCs, session border controllers. And so this is like an SBC session border controller that's bordering the session between, you know, any use case and allowing engineers to API into it. I once heard Mark Andreessen say the one thing he forgot to put into Mosaic, the
Was
original
money.
version of Netscape, was the pay button.
Yes.
Click
Yep.
here to send or receive cash, and
Yep.
that was missing. So you probably had a lot of late night or early morning conversations with Jack Dorsey about the role in the world of Visa, Mastercard, and Amex. Sometimes I think like, what percentage of all money being spent with the multiplier of like you pay me, I pay her, she pays him, and it just keeps going. And Mastercard and Visa is in every goddamn grocery store, offering me amazing lounge access, but they're just pulling the money out of us. What do you think about like how is that even existing? What are your thoughts around
Well,
why that
Visa
continues to
Mastercard have like
tax?
distribution, so both on the issuing and the acquiring side, so they got a big footprint. But if you think about Mastercard and Visa, imagine that you have a USB-C card or a USDC card, and imagine the merchant is also on USB-C or USDC. When you show up and you swipe your card through the card points to your identity. The terminal points to the merchant's identity. Once you've done that, thank you very much, Visa and MasterCard, for basically pointing those things. You don't need Visa and MasterCard to do clearing and settlement because once you're
Exactly.
identified, you're both on the same ledger. And really, you've turned Visa and MasterCard into an ID network of payors and payees. And it's just a way of making sure I got the right payer and the right payee. But I don't need you for clearing and settlement because I'm going to move this money without going through the banking system. Because
Isn't blockchain just like ridiculously obviously better for this?
it's just much simpler. But the question is you're disintermediating. You're turning Visa and Mastercard into an identity network and saying thank you much for your clearing and settlement services, but I don't need them. And it's the same thing with Google and Apple. When you're online and you want to buy something, and Google and Apple want to take their 30% for processing the payment, if you're the payor and you're the payee, and maybe you're buying like access to a dating site, like once the dating site knows who you are, and you obviously know who the dating site is, the question is, okay, I use my phone and the internet to do this, but now that it's time to clear and settle, I don't need you, Apple. I don't need you, Google. I don't need you, MasterCard. I don't need you, Visa.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I don't need you, Bank A and Bank B, because like at the casino, once you've got the chips, you're not at the window anymore. You're on the poker floor. And, if you walk outside and somebody buys 5 of those chips from you for $5, casino doesn't have anything to do with that. You're in the world of tokenized money.
Yeah.
And so all those players, all those rent seekers, bye bye, right? You don't
Yeah,
need them.
but I've been saying this to you for like 18 years now. It's kind of very odd to me. I remember when I got married, my wife made me buy a television and a DVD player, and I said to her in 2000, "This DVD player is going to be obsolete because we'll have a set-top box that downloads the DVD." And then,
Yep.
like 10 years later, she was making fun of me while she was still popping in the DVD. So we had it much longer than I. So I was very wrong about the DVD becoming obsolete quickly, and it just blows my mind that the rent is being like their margin is someone's opportunity,
Yep.
and I just can't believe that it continues.
Well, there's still a lot of power in distribution, and Apple and Google sue people that bypass their rails. So even if you don't use their rails, they still want their 30%. And Visa and MasterCard, they don't allow you right now to issue a card and then use them for identity, but not use them for clearing and settlement. So this unbundling and saying, I just want to use my phone for talking and browsing the internet, not for payments. I just want to use my card in the terminal there to identify myself and then pay through something else. Like that just breaks the rules. It's not because it's not technically or economically feasible or desirable to do so. It's just those folks have market power. And if you do those things, they will punish you, right? They will stop you from doing everything else that you used to do because you want to do this one thing better. They don't want you unbundling. But the world is changing and they're not in a position to control that as much. And you've seen that with stablecoins. But stablecoins have invaded the world of TradeFi. They haven't really hit the world of retail payments yet, although many merchants are being paid in USDC. People aren't yet paying in USDC, but that will come, and you're going to see a big step up. And it'll come because there are folks like us that are banks that are willing to defect and allow it to happen. But generally they've not let people that are from the barbarians, like folks that are in crypto and fintech, own banks, right? And banks generally haven't really owned disruptive fintechs. But I might have a bank, and maybe my investor might be like the Solana Foundation, right? And so I'm going to have a very different perspective with what I do with my bank than a bank that's basically built a moat around it and is trying to keep the fintechs and crypto out. I'm already pregnant on both sides, right? So, and I'm just here kind of to see what happens. Like, I'm not looking to build a new moat. I just want to get to the Star Trek future in my lifetime. So
Well,
that's what motivates us.
where does the jurisdiction start and end for Vast Bank out of Oklahoma? Like, are can someone sitting in Estonia open an account with you? Like, what are the issues of that? I mean, I normally think like you cross a sovereign border and go from the United States into Canada, and it's a whole new world. Like
Well, I live in Lake Tahoe and it snows. And people run those ski lifts. Where are they from? They're from Argentina. Do they have bank accounts? Yeah, they do. Yeah, they walked into a branch to get the bank account, but is there some reason that physically walking through the door means you can open a bank account as opposed to doing it from like far away? People have done it from far away. You know what those people are called? Rich people. But there's not something fundamentally different about signing up someone who's poor or just middle income from Argentina to have that account. That person doesn't lose the account when they go home to Argentina. Like the big banks, other banks, it's just a matter of policy. It's not a matter of regulation. Yeah, you have to know the identity of the person you're signing up, but you know, banking at the end of the day is just like, the Augusta Golf Club. They used to have a rule: no Jews, no women, no blacks. And why? Like, what? We're going to have to change the golf course because we have women, Jews, and blacks? And finally, they just said, no, they can join. And so it's the same thing for a bank account. Like,
so,
why?
I mean,
Why can't a person who's not an American have a bank account? Well, they can. They do. They're just called rich people, but you don't
right.
have to limit it to rich people.
Yeah, I mean, anyone can walk into Credit Suisse and open a bank account in Geneva if you bring your passport.
Someone's got to have the will. Look, you got to have risk practices. You got to have identity, and be willing to do it. But we have tons of company in my portfolio that have customers all over the world. Uphold had like 1 million customers in Venezuela, and the bank they were servicing them was like, we don't like Venezuelans. They're out, right? Or else you're out. And that's how a whole group of people get de-risked. To me, that's discrimination. Because other people would say, well, that's risk management. And I'm like, well, that's risk avoidance. Risk management is how do you service people that might come from like a low income area. If you did that in the US and you redline people out because they live in a distressed financial area called a ghetto in the US, that'd be against the law. But if we're like disallowing people because, we obviously don't disallow people because of race, religion, or gender, but I don't understand why we disallow people because of nationality, regardless of
It's
what you
been
think about
weaponization.
immigration.
Like sometimes the weaponization of SWIFT or something is just driving people into the arms of the Chinese or something, something else as well. Which is
There's no
interesting.
problem. I'm at Risk Bank. I bought Vast Bank. I said, well, what's high risk? And they said, well, if you don't live in Tulsa. And I said, what, Oklahoma City's high risk? And they go, yes. And I'm like, well, what about Texas? Oh, definitely Texas. So the idea of like banking someone from Canada, like it blew their mind. But I'm like, look, I'm just putting a different hat on. We don't have a different set of rules for sending somebody a JPEG to Canada, right? Like it's not how the internet works. And so if I have risk practices and I'm managing risk, I will sign up people from Oklahoma City, from Texas, from Mexico, from Malaysia. Like to me, that's just risk management. We know how to do that. And obviously it's already happening on the internet for stable coins or Bitcoin. We send money all around the world. What? It's going to be worse just because we're doing it compliantly and we know somebody's identity. It's going to happen either way. When you allow stable coins, who do you think wants to hold those dollars? Americans, they've already got easy access to that. That's everybody else in the world. And so where's that money going to sit? At a bank in a pooled account? Well, Does the bank know who actually has those dollars? No, they just rolled up a paper bag and put it on their head. And that's what stablecoin legislation is going to allow. But like, why would having better information for risk and compliance be a worse thing, right? So we're going to get stablecoin legislation. I better think that the banks aren't going to just sit there on their butts and let fintechs steal away all the deposits. They better start tokenizing their deposits as well, and get to work and emphasize the benefits of doing it with FDIC insurance and with Reg E protection. So if you get robbed, you get your money back, as opposed to like, if you get robbed with a stable coin, you get better luck next time, right?
Yeah, no recourse. Explain, Greg, in layman's terms, what tokenization of any asset means, and what is tokenization of a bank deposit or securitizing any real asset?
Yeah, all tokenization means, like, it's like, just think about your car title. Like, I got my car and it's registered in like Nevada, and like someone else has a car and it's registered in London, England. Like, and so all those registrations are in these little pots. It's like CompuServe and AOL. The question is, why didn't I get a title that says it's just registered on a chain? And now I might live in Nevada or in whatnot, but the ownership of the car is just to me, regardless of which jurisdiction it is. That's just another field in the database. And so if I want to send my car to you, it's one thing for me to hand you the keys. It's another thing for me to hand you the token, hand you the title. When titles are tokenized, it means I can send it to you. I can give it to you without having to ask permission of this centralized ledger or that centralized. There's just one ledger. And whether it's for cars or bikes or houses or diamonds or dollars, it just means there's one master on us ledger, and you move things around. And you might have a custodian, but the custodian's using that one big ledger too. I lived in New Zealand back years ago, and I had an assignment. They had 4 banks in New Zealand. They all used one ledger. It wasn't blockchain. It was just one ledger. So if I moved from ANZ to Westpac, I still had the same balance. They just changed in the database. Now it's ANZ versus Westpac. So you build the ledger at the identity, at the customer level, and then all these other custodians and intermediaries, they just use that one big ledger.
Yeah,
And so
even
as
in the
opposed to
UK,
having
you got
everything
like sort
tracked.
code. Well, I
Sure.
lived in London, and I remember being like, "What the? Why is the U.S. so messed up? All you need is a sort code and an account number, and they get it instantly. Like
Yep.
there's no. It's like your Citibank to Citibank. It's like on net VoIP call. It just goes.
So you can have one system that all the account numbers. You can still have a bank, but that's like who I delegated responsibility to. Just the phone companies used to own your phone number. If you changed phone companies, you had to get a new phone number. But then they just said, no, the phone number belongs to you, and the phone company services your phone number. So phone numbers have become tokenized. They're a thing that you can own. And you could transfer your phone number to someone else. You could transfer your phone number to being serviced by a different phone company. What we're saying is that's going to happen to all assets. Dollars just happens to be one of them. Currency just happens to be one of them. But whether it's diamonds or Ferraris, it's like it's a title, but it's a title that's more portable.
And
That's what a
and
token is.
and car titles is almost a bad example because unless it is a collectible Ferrari, it's a depreciating asset. So
Correct.
explain what tokenization of appreciating assets.
Well, like I'm invested in a company called Kindred, which restores old Broncos, old V-Dubs, and old Porsches. And when we redo one of those cars that cost like 200,000, and they go up in value. And we just keep a registry of who owns them all. And if somebody shows up and they have the car, and I'm like, I have the keys, and I'm like, yeah, but you're not on the registry. You stole it, right? So it's just a registry of who owns what. And like, we live and die, but some of the assets out there, homes and whatnot, real estate, it goes on forever. So the question is, who owns who? If you watch the TV series Downton Abbey, people come and go, but the reason it's called Downton Abbey is the real estate's always there, just different people own it. And so to some extent, we own the assets, but flip side around is the assets own us. Our identity can be tokenized as well. That's what like global ID is. There's a namespace, and you have a name. Just like Coca-Cola has a domain name, coca-cola.com. It could sell it to Pepsi. It probably isn't going to do it, But if Pepsi had enough money, it could buy that domain name. And so those are all things that can just move ownership on a ledger that everybody recognizes, as opposed to having everything in a silo. It's the difference between CompuServe and AOL, and why if you sent a picture from AOL to CompuServe, it came out like a scrambled egg, versus the internet, where things just move interoperably. Right? It's why we
And
have Safari. You can't get around a risk control because you use Safari instead of Chrome. They're just browsers. The standards for everything happen at a lower level. They happen at the base level.
and how's that? I suppose this is all very traceable. So I mean, I've been in VC now long enough that I've had Japanese LPs get cancer, die, and assign their LP interest to somebody else.
Right.
And there's
Yep.
like, I think it's 55% tax is the death tax rate.
Yep.
In this world that you're dealing with the Japanese government, revenue service be able to tax transfer ownership in these cases,
Yeah, I
or
mean,
is it
just
more wild world of crypto?
well, at the end of the day, like in our system, we're talking about we have a rule that you can't move the money without identity. And so to enforce that rule, there's a cosigner to every transaction, which is this USBC foundation. And they'll look to see, well, do you have a name? Well, you have to have a name. And, are you on the OFAC list? Well, you're on the OFAC list. We can't do this. So we're not going to cosign the transaction. So the way you make something that's open have permissions is to basically have smart contracts that say, well, you need cosigners to do certain things. So we could run all this on Solana, which is generally seen as a fairly distributed, non-permission chain, but with smart contracts, of which they're quite bare bones on Solana. But you can certainly say, for this kind of transaction, i.e. moving money, you need a cosigner. The cosigner can be someone who organizes to make sure the scheme is compliant. Or in this case, it could be like the Japanese government saying, well, you're going to do this kind of transfer for this situation. You got to pay taxes, right? Like you can build that in, or you can choose not to build that in. And we're taking basically unpermissioned technology and building a layer of permissions on top of it to differentiate ourselves from stablecoins. And then stablecoins will be able to do lots of things where you can avoid taxes. And society might decide that's okay. But, the question is, how is that gray money going to mix with green money? You can think of the world as a 2x2 matrix, senders and receivers, with identity, without. With identity, without. And when you send green with to the receiver, that's kind of like normal legal commerce. When you send from something that has no identity to something with identity, there's a name for that. That's money laundering. You made money some way off the grid, and now you want to get it into the financial system. And when you flip that around, green to gray, there's a name for that too. It's called vice. You made money legitimately, and now you want to do something off the grid. That's green to gray. And when it's gray to gray, that's like honor amongst thieves. That's like Silk Road. I'm guns for guns for drugs. And those three segments, that's some portion of the GDP of the world, maybe 15, 20%, but the other 80% is green to green, and it wants to stay green to green. And there's
Yeah,
vested interests that want
I
to keep
think.
it green.
I mean, Vast Bank could become just a very enormous company worthy of the name. I mean, if you look at an Uber driver in Bogota, Medellin, Colombia, who has to drive somebody across town and then has to load up at the gas petrol station, and the money he's got to pay with real money to get the gas in the car, and he may not necessarily be getting paid through Uber, Didi, 99 Taxi, whoever, the rideshare company. If they also, you brought up Argentina, which has lived through hyperinflation, but
Yep.
people told me they put all their Argentine pesos into women's shoes because that would hold the value longer than than their tender,
That's
the
true.
national tender. So, what are the implications of what you're working on for people who live in these countries that go through hyperinflation or have this issue of I got to pay real money for the gas, petrol, and the Citibank payment system and Amex isn't quite working for the guy?
Well, I'm just back from Argentina. They got 280 billion under the mattress. It's the second largest source of U.S. dollars, $100 bills outside the U.S. And so they're all very sophisticated dealing with electronic wallets, or Brazil. So The question is, at the end of the day, what do you want to have in your wallet? You want to have an Argentinian pesos, 250% inflation every day you hold it, you're losing value, or do you want to hold it in dollars? And at the last moment, if you need to do something in pesos, it converts at that moment. Obviously, everybody wants dollars. They're dollarizing their economy. And quite
They
frankly,
used
everyone
to.
around the
I've
world.
been to Buenos Aires where you go to the ATM machine and it asks you, do you want this in USD or in pesos? It would spit
Yep.
out USD, but then that
Yep.
currency board blew up in like March of 2000 or
Yeah.
something.
But this is coming to those. And when I visit the central banks in those countries, about halfway through the meeting, they understand, look, I'm not here to ask permission. I'm just explaining what is happening right now. And so it's happening with stablecoins. The question is, are deposit tokens even better because they have all these other protections? Like, what do people want at the end of the day? Well, they want dollars. And what they really want is safe dollars. They'd love to know that the dollar they have isn't going to just like blow up. They like FDIC insurance. We take it for granted. But if you've seen some of these banks that failed, like the reason we're sleeping at night is because they had FDIC insurance. Everybody wants that. That FDIC insurance isn't something that's just made for Americans. Like if you're a French person and you have an account at Wells Fargo and they get in trouble, you don't get differential FDI insurance because you're French rather than American. And so that product feature is built in. Either the bank paid its insurance premiums or it didn't. And it didn't pay them for people from this nationality or gender or religion and not for these. It's not like getting the back of the bus. That's not the way money works, or should it work? And so we're committed to making this all compliant. But the biggest use for dollars, the interest is obviously not just in the US. We have 5% of the population. The other 95% of the people in the world and the use cases are everywhere but the US.
Yeah, I think my experience with getting a little bit down the rabbit hole of crypto in 2016 to like 2019 was Americans don't really understand. They're like, à quoi bon? What's the point of this? I mean, I have my gold credit card that gets me into the business lounge. I've got my money in dollars. I live in America. Who the hell has any of these problems? Where these other countries are like, they've got they got money coming in and out as suppliers that goes into their medical device, and there's a lot of FX problematics.
I mean,
Moving money around.
In America, yeah, we have bonus miles, but we just have high swipe fees that are built into everything we do. Like we're passing legislation in Nevada that'll let retailers get a bank charter, right? And then they can be the issuer and the acquirer, and that 3% that comes off the top. And for a lot of these retailers, 3% is their whole profit margin. So they
Yeah,
have to make six, pay
yeah.
three to get
This
three.
this is where I was saying like that rent is somebody's margin, or that margin is someone's opportunity. So let's talk about what regulators should be doing. If you were somehow dictator and able to make changes so that the regulations catch up with the innovators and we get rid of some bad things that have been around for way too long, and I'm always wrong about predicting their demise, but what regulation do we need?
Well, I think the regulation we need, and we're pushing for this in Nevada, is just opening up access to the banking rails, to really the payment rails. Like in Europe, you can get an EMI. You don't have to be a bank to submit a transaction to send money from A to B. In the US, you do. Nobody, if you're not a bank, you cannot submit a wire transaction, an ACH transaction, you can't process checks, none of that. You have to go get a bank. But if we open up who can get a bank license, or we make the activities of banking licensed as opposed to banks licensed, then there's competition, and with competition comes innovation. There are folks like Walmart and Amazon, they know a thing or two about transaction processing, and if they were banks, you can be damn sure Walmart and Amazon are going to bring down bank charges. And people are like, they don't see the bank charges. They don't realize that, like for an ACH transaction, when you do bill pay, like we, the Fed, because I used to work at the Fed and the payments group, we charge a quarter of a cent. They turn around and charge the bill pay company 25 cents. You might say, well, it's just 25 cents. That's a 10,000% markup. When you do a wire transfer, you're used to paying like 25 bucks. You know how much we charge at the Fed to the company that's doing the wire transfer? How much the actual cost is? It's 25 cents. Again, 25 cents to 25,000. It's not a 100% markup. It's not 1,000% markup. It's 10,000%.
So
So
is
those
this
costs are built into everything because banks have a moat built around them. And look, I should be happy. I have one of those banks. I could be in the moat building business, but my belief is that the cost of payments, the price of payments should be zero. They're
Right.
like zero.
That's the whole what the hell with Amex and Amazon taxing us like they're the IRS. They, so do you think this is a Citizens United issue? Like we just have legal bribery and those with the bank licenses continue to call up our elected officials and say, here's some money to keep you in power. And oh, by the way, it would be horrible for Walmart to lower prices of eggs
Yeah.
if
Well,
if you allow them to have a bank license. Like, is it just an open corruption of our
well, you
Citizens
can call
United
it
legal bribery?
corruption. See, I lived in places like Indonesia. Like, we don't call it corruption. We just call it wetness. How wet is this deal? Which means like how much do you have to pay off the top? Keep it. But it's what we call
Lubrication
politely,
money.
politely
Germans
in the
call it
U.S. We call it
Schmierungsgeld.
yeah, regulatory capture. And so like folks that have gone through, it's like hazing. Once you've been through hazing to get into the fraternity, then now you're going to haze the next generation. Well, you have to go through the same hell I went through. So look, I'm in the tent now, and I could basically, celebrate that. But it's not my nature. I want like lots of people in the tent because I want to see what happens when we actually have competition, because I believe that will lead to innovation and inclusion. In other countries, the regulatory environment, each of those things, competition, innovation, inclusion, are parts of the duty of the regulators. In the United States, it's only safety and soundness. And safety and soundness is like, don't change anything. Because if we change something, it might break. And then that could be a problem. So we would rather, there's like this poem, each day I hope and pray that tomorrow will be the same as today. So don't touch anything. That's why our systems, which we're a leader in the world back in the 1960s, are still the systems we have today, just like our air traffic control system. We haven't modernized it. We haven't upgraded it. It operates at scale. It doesn't break down that much because, it's tried and true, but all the rest of the world has moved on. We still have the most trusted product, which is the US dollar, but it runs on janky old rails. And so
Terrible
all we're
rails. Yeah.
saying is keep the dollar, just run it on better rails.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we run out of time, you did kind of put your hat in the ring with politics in Nevada, and I think I heard you talking about, you know, the permanent Alaska Fund is, I think, the biggest sovereign wealth fund in the United States. I had the guy who runs it, awesome dude,
Yep.
and he told me it was 65. He's from San Diego. He told me, which I thought, Jesus Christ, moving from San Diego to Anchorage, that must be some serious jet lag with the sun setting at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. But I think he had 65 billion a couple of years ago when I spoke to him. Like, it was like during lockdown that I had
Yep.
him on the pod. What's your vision for Nevada? Like, what are they doing wrong? What should they be doing right? If anyone's listening.
Well, look, Nevada's like mine was free, fair, and wild, with emphasis on the third one, wild. Nevada, we've always been comfortable with managing risk rather than avoiding it. That's why we have the sex industry there. We have the gambling industry. My district produces the max gold and silver for the United States. It's like a wildcatter state. We know how to manage risk and do it responsibly. And like in the gambling industry, we used to like fraud and money laundering. Why shouldn't we be the folks that are the best at managing a new generation of banks that operate all around the world and manage the risk rather than run away from it? Somebody's got to do it. Why don't we do it and do it well? That's why people come to Las Vegas to gamble. It's got the best odds and slots, and we're good at those things. We're good at mining. We're good at gambling. Why shouldn't we be good at like processing payments? And so the future of Nevada is to build another leg to its economic diversity. As for that sovereign wealth fund, yeah, Alaska's got 65 billion. It's the biggest in the country, but tiny Norway has 1.7 trillion. They've got a bigger sovereign wealth
Quebec,
fund than
the
Saudi
Caisse de
Arabia.
depot to Quebec is 400 billion. I asked them, I'm trying to get them to invest in my VC fund, and I said, like, is that Canadian or dollars? The 400 billion, and they were like, does it matter?
Yeah, I know. It's big. So, but it just comes down to, do you have an investment mentality? And, this country's now talking about a sovereign wealth fund too, funded with Bitcoin or other cryptos. And so, but, up till now, we've been kind of hand to mouth in the US. We've gotten away with it. We have a lot of other benefits, but, we're going to have to compete a little and shake things up. And, a whole bunch of problems with the Trump administration about a bunch of public policy issues. I obviously was not a Trumper in my election. But I have been able to work with Democrats and Republicans and Trumpers, at least in this area, to open things up with open banking, fair access. We're going to see breathing room. And look, there'll be failures and problems, but under the last administration, there was virtually no change, no innovation. Everything was locked down. Look, I got through, but I have every advantage, right? Like I have every like old white guy advantage possible, and it still was a pain in the ass. But for anybody else,
Yeah,
it
I
doesn't
mean,
look
you
like
worked
they.
at the Fed. Not every Sam Bankman-Fried was
Right.
able to push that by Biden.
Yeah, I worked at the Fed. I already have like a ton of cash just lying around to do this, right? So if you know, and if it was almost impossible for me to buy in, just imagine anybody else that doesn't have like a resume on a platter. And we need all sorts of people to basically innovate, compete, create inclusion. Otherwise, we're just we're just
It's
stuck in the
just a
mud.
world for the Pritzkers and the Walton family to run the banks.
Yeah, and I think we need innovation in every segment. Like it's the same thing for AI. I believe in diversity of solutions for energy. Like again, I like people ask, well, are you pro crypto? I was like, look, I'm pro money. I think everybody should have more of it, whether it's cash, gold, or crypto. Like let's be good at whatever we're doing, whether it's AI, energy, money. Let's better to be a leader rather than a laggard. And so that's a cry that I'm actually working to get Democrats rallied around. I'm kind of proud that, in my state, both Democrats and Republicans voted for some of the innovations in this space, and that's really my role. And I ran nonpartisan, and so I am working with both Democrats and Republicans, just for if it's better for us and better for the rest of the world. It's just a very common sense approach.
So we're out of time. So final parting question: what specifics should like David Sachs be pushing for, getting clarity on unambiguous things? I mean, there's not enough time to get into all the debanked. I actually wanted to hear you explain what's going on there too. But
I think just on this whole sort of money side of things, recognize that Bitcoin is a new form of gold and it might be a great store of value. I'm not saying put all your money in Bitcoin, but just recognize that there's a new gold in town. And on money, we already know the answer. Dollars, English, Hollywood, those are great exports from America. Let's make our dollar the best dollar in the world. And that means it's got to be super efficient, but it's got to be available to everyone. And so get over yourself, accept the fact that everybody's going to have dollars, and you have to decide whether you're going to do it in a George Orwell way, like 1984. You're going to do it in like a Mad Max kind of way. If you want to give it over to like Elon and Mark Zuckerberg, kind of like creepy Mark and creepy Elon way, or do you want to do something more like Star Trek? I'm obviously in the Star Trek thing. Do things, somewhat decentralized, have some guardrails, but leverage the new technology and leverage the fact that U.S. is still trusted. We screw up a bunch of things, but when the shit hits the fan, the mighty dollar is the thing that everybody runs to. Okay, well, let's make that dollar as good as it can be, and let's build on our strength, and have a good time doing it, and let's lead from this country, not lag. And so those messages are really pro the crypto community. They make good use of AI, and again, I'm doing it with the guys with guns and badges, not like Mad Max. Okay,
yeah,
so that's
look,
it.
Greg, I think if you could collapse the period of time that it takes you to achieve your goal with Vastbank, the reserve currency superpower that the United States has could be amplified by orders of magnitude. I mean, if you just gave everybody in El Salvador, Greg could dollars, your USBC on their phones,
Yep.
we could hire them as engineers. They could get paid. They could zap it at the petrol pump and the gas station, whatever. And it would just be so much better for the stability of their, income versus payments that giving USD to the world is something that people sitting in Nantucket don't seem to understand, but it's just massive. It could benefit this country so much to be able to print that and have everybody using it.
Pax Romana, like that's my thought. That's why people are like, why don't you give your money to charity? I'm like, well, this is the best social cause I can think of, is getting everybody a seat at the table. And that's really it. And so my history with Twitter, with Square, look, they weren't that innovative technologically. What they were access revolutions. They were democratization. They gave people the ability to be a publisher, the ability to take payments. And now we have the ability to democratize money around a common standard, which is really what the internet did. That's how we got from CompuServe and AOL to the World Wide Web. And so that's got to happen with money. I'm sure it's going to happen. I can't think of any other way the future is going to happen. And it just makes my life really simple. It's just keep all ships pointed in that direction. Stable coins are a step in the right direction, but we can do better. And so that's really the message that I'm there. I'm not against stable coins. I back a bunch of companies that do stable coins, but this is stable coins plus with consumer protections and assurances so people can have all those benefits and still feel safe, safer than they do with stable coins.
Yeah, well, it's been a fascinating mix of the mix of like Long Island boiler room bankers of early crypto became friends with the anarchists of F the police. And then you've got you saying like, guys, I legitimately worked at the Fed and there's this thing called the law. And then there's risk. So I think it's fun. It's fun to see you take your past success and pump it into this. I certainly think your long-term, your vision that you're working on is great. We're out of time, but I'd love to hear everything else you're doing at Hard Yakka. By the way, Hard Yakka, are you like the sole LP? Is that just like permanent money, Greg Kidd money, or do you take LPs? Like if I wanted to invest in your fund, could I get my money in Hard Yakka?
No, we're not a venture capital. This is just money that I like
It's just you.
made in Forrest Gump kind of way. But the purpose of the money is not to earn financial returns. It's to basically move the dial. And it's one of those things where we set out to do good, but we often end up doing well. And so I don't see anything incompatible with the sort of social goals of democratizing money in the US dollar and actually doing pretty well. Tether's kind of proved that, but I think what I'm talking about is much bigger than Tether. Right?
Yeah, I get it. Well, listen, man, I'm rooting for you. I always am. Thanks for taking the time, and I love learning about all this stuff from you. So see you soon, Greg. Thank you so much.
Thanks for checking in.
Okay, bye for now.